Welcome to the wonderful fantasy world. Subscribe now. Opening. The first glimmer of the blood, red eyes. Blood. Tinged spittle, with a rusty smell, oozed from Aiden's mouth. He knelt on one knee in the alley full of gravel, his knuckles turning white from excessive force. Behind him came the clicking sound of metal gears meshing, like the approaching footsteps of death. The pursuers from the Holy Radiance Church had surrounded him. Those cold, glinting gear armors sparkled in the moonlight, and on each piece of armor was engraved the emblem of the Holy Radiance Church, a rotating gear with a hexagram embedded in it. Aiden's gaze swept around. There were 12 pursuers, each holding a gear-tipped lance engraved with incantations. The leading knight lifted his visor, revealing a scar-covered face, his eyes filled with hatred. The spawn of the god. Slayer, surrender. Your bloodline is a desecration of the divine throne. Aiden wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and sneered. Desecration? You puppies, controlled by the gear imprints, are the real desecration of this continent. Just as he finished speaking, there was a faint struggle in his arms. Looking down, he saw a young man of the hawk-headed tribe. His wings were pierced by the church's spell, bound arrows, and blood kept oozing out, staining his silver-white feathers red. Aiden had saved this young man 3 hours ago. At that time, he was searching for clues about his father in the most chaotic black market in the city, when he suddenly heard a commotion. Pushing through the crowd, he saw several church knights chasing this alien youth. The youth exuded a faint spiritual vein fluctuation, a pure natural power, completely different from the gear imprints the church maintained with blood. Almost instinctively, Aiden rushed out. He would always remember that burning night 10 years ago. His mother was tied to the stake, and the church high priest declared her an alien spy. As the flames devoured her body, his father stuffed a jade pendant with 2 intertwined snakes into his hand and said, "Go to the misty wasteland to find the ancient tree," then disappeared into the night. Since then, he had wandered with this jade pendant, working as a bodyguard for black market merchants until he witnessed the church's atrocities again today, when he actively used the power of his blood-red eyes for the first time. The whole world seemed to stand still. He saw cracks appearing on the gears above those knights' heads, and the speed of the cracks spreading indicated the probability of their death. This was an experience he had never had before. In the past, the power of his blood-red eyes was always triggered passively at the critical moment of life and death, but this time, he awakened it actively to protect others. "Do you think you can escape?" The leading knight raised his lance, the gears spinning rapidly at the tip, bursting out with a dazzling light. The judgment of the Holy Radiance Church cannot be resisted. At his command, the other knights activated their gear imprints, one after another. The ground began to shake, and countless gears rose from the ground, forming a huge cage. Aiden held the young man in his arms tightly, and the double-snake jade pendant suddenly emitted a strong light. A series of pictures flashed before his eyes. A silver-haired woman holding a snake-shaped long sword, fiercely fighting a man wearing a gear mask. The spiritual veins of the two intertwined in the air, forming a blood-colored and silver light net. On the misty wasteland, a huge petrified ancient tree exuded a mysterious aura, and the dewdrops condensed on the leaves refracted colorful lights. And his father's last smile, stuffing the jade pendant into his hand, then disappearing into a blood mist, with the words, "Remember, the truth is hidden in the cracks of the gears," echoing in his ears. "What is this? Double quotes." Before Aiden could think, the double snake mark suddenly appeared on his forehead, a pattern of a red snake and a silver snake intertwined, exuding a strange light. When the church knights saw this mark, expressions of horror appeared on their faces. It was the symbol of the battle of the 2 snakes 100 years ago, and the proof of the reincarnation of the Godslayer, recorded in the church scriptures. Sure enough, he is the reincarnation of the Godslayer. "Quick, kill him," the leading knight shouted. The gear cage began to shrink, and lances stabbed towards Aiden like a rainstorm. At the critical moment, the remnant soul residing in the jade pendant suddenly appeared. It was a vague figure, and its voice carried a hint of helplessness. You ultimately chosen the most difficult path. The dispute between me and Lauren back then eventually led to the entire continent's downfall. Are you sure you want to repeat the same mistake? Although the power of the remnant soul was weak, it was enough to help Aiden block a fatal blow. Taking the opportunity, Aiden hugged the young man and rushed out of the encirclement, running towards the outside of the city. Behind him, the church's pursuers closely followed, their gear armors twinkling in the night like a giant steel python. The roar of those rotating gears reminded Aiden of his mother's coughing sound before her death. Both were the friction between metal and flesh, and both were the wail of life under the tyranny of machinery. Finally, Aiden reached the city gate. When the guards saw the double snake mark on his forehead, they immediately activated the city gate's defense system. The huge gears began to turn, and the city gate slowly closed. Aiden gritted his teeth and activated his blood-red eyes again. He saw a crack at the connection of the gears of the city gate, a trace left by years of erosion and overloading of the spell, like the truth full of holes under the church's rule. Now, Aiden put down the young man, concentrated all his strength, and punched the crack of the city gate. With a loud bang, the city gate collapsed, and rubble splashed. The fragments of the gears cut his arm, and blood dripped onto the ground, but it was strangely absorbed by the ground. This was the after effect of the Eternal Silence disaster. The earth no longer accepted human blood, unless it was transformed through the gear imprints. Aiden picked up the young man and disappeared into the night. When he finally got rid of the pursuers and came to a wilderness, it was already dawn. The young man woke up in his arms and looked at him with grateful and surprised eyes. Why did you save me? Do you know how much trouble you've gotten yourself into? The Holy Radiance Church will hunt you down to every corner of the continent. Aiden looked at the rising sun in the east, touched the double snake jade pendant in his arms, and said, "Because I want to expose the church's lies." The Eternal Silence disaster 20 years ago was not the alien race plundering the spiritual veins at all, but a conspiracy fabricated by the predecessor of the church, the Gear Council. My mother was burned to death by them, and my father disappeared. And this jade pendant, ... He held up the jade pendant. In the morning light, the patterns of the red snake and the silver snake seemed to come alive and swing. It tells me that the blood-colored lines of the gear imprints are actually the chains that imprisoned the alien spiritual veins back then. The young man looked at him in shock. You actually know all this? I'm a scout of the hawk-headed tribe in the misty wasteland. The elders in our tribe said that 100 years ago, there were 2 Godslayers, 1 human and 1 snake race. Their battle triggered the Eternal Silence disaster. But the church said that the aliens used their spiritual veins to create the disaster. ... The church's history is the lie of the victors. Aiden interrupted him. My grandmother was Vera, the leader of the snake race. Humans called her Red Snake. And my grandfather Lauren was the inventor of the gear imprints, Silver Snake. The battle of the 2 snakes back then was actually Lauren trying to devour the alien spiritual veins to create a divine throne. And Vera tried to stop him, and they ended up perishing together. The divine throne the church worships now is the creation of Lauren back then. It has been absorbing the alien spiritual veins, trying to resurrect. The young man's eyes widened. How do you know all this? There's a remnant soul in the jade pendant. Aiden pointed to the mark on his forehead. It's Vera's remnant soul. She appears occasionally, but never tells me the answers directly. She said that the truth needs to be dug out by myself. And you? He looked at the young man. You can condense a spiritual fireball with your bare hands. This is pure natural spiritual vein power. But the church calls you spiritual vein thieves. In fact, humans have long lost the ability to perceive spiritual veins, and can only rely on gear imprints to steal the alien spiritual veins. The young man was silent for a while, then stretched out his hand, and a small spiritual fireball emerged in his palm. My name is Kelan. The aliens in the misty wasteland maintain the ecosystem through the spiritual vein symbiosis ceremony. We communicate with the elements and resonate with the earth, but humans use gears to cut the spiritual veins and feed the machines with blood. You're right. The church has been lying. Aiden nodded. I'm going to the misty wasteland to find clues about my father and that petrified ancient tree. According to the fragmented memories of the remnant soul, it was transformed from Vera's bones, and its leaves can restore humans' ability to perceive spiritual veins. Perhaps the key to overthrowing the divine throne is hidden there. Kalen looked at the double snake mark on Aiden's forehead. But you're half human and half alien. The radical faction in the misty wasteland may not accept you. However, double quotes, he suddenly smiled. The elders have been waiting for the messenger of the two snakes in the prophecy. It is said that he can break the curse of the gears and the spiritual veins. Perhaps you are the one in the prophecy. Aiden smiled bitterly. I'm not any messenger. I just want to know the truth. Whether it's the secret of the divine throne or the cause of my parents' death, I want to uncover it with my own hands. Even if this process will subvert the whole world. Double quotes. His gaze was 投向 the distance. The direction of the misty wasteland was covered with a faint mist, like the truth of this world, covered layer by layer by the church's lies. At this time, in the secret room of the Holy Radiance Church, the high priest was kneeling in front of a huge gear-shaped divine throne. On the base of the divine throne was engraved the same double snake intertwined pattern as on Aiden's forehead. The high priest's wrinkled hand stroked the gear, muttering to himself, Lord Lowry, your plan is finally about to come true. The bloodline of the Godslayer has awakened, and the double snake mark has reappeared in the world. The divine throne is about to absorb enough spiritual veins and restart the eternal silence disaster. Behind him, a huge mural depicted the scene 100 years ago. Silver Snake Lorne stood on the top of the divine throne, countless gears falling from the sky, devouring the alien spiritual veins. Red Snake Vera brandished a snake-shaped long sword, trying to cut the chains of the gears, but was entangled by the gears and gradually petrified. In the corner of the mural, a human man was holding a baby, exactly Aiden's father, his eyes filled with pain and unwillingness. On the edge of the misty wasteland, the petrified ancient tree suddenly let out a low rumble. A leaf slowly fell, landed on the ground, and instantly bloomed with a dazzling light. As if responding to Aiden's arrival, responding to the truth that was about to be uncovered, the holder of the double snake mark was both the container of the divine throne and the rebirth of the Godslayer. The figures of Aiden and Carlin gradually disappeared into the morning mist. Their steps were firm and heavy. What awaited them ahead were the unknown dangers of the misty wasteland, the internal division of the alien race, and the tight net laid by the church. But Aiden knew that he had no way back. In his blood-red eyes, the cracks in those gears were constantly expanding, indicating the end of an old era and the beginning of a new era chosen by himself. He clenched Kylan's hand, feeling the temperature in the other's palm. That was the pure power of the spiritual veins, without the coldness of the gears and the bloodiness of the imprints. Perhaps this was part of the answer. In the game between the gears and the spiritual veins, in the confrontation between humans and aliens, the real salvation was never to eliminate one side, but to find that forgotten path of symbiosis. And all of this would start from the first step he took into the misty wasteland. The double snake mark on his forehead flickered, as if telling a vow that spanned 100 years. This time, I will choose my own destiny, whether it is to slay the gods or be reborn. This episode ends here. The next episode will be more exciting. Subscribe now